ship carrying large amount of drugs and cash belonging to world's most dangerous terrorist group destroyed by U.S. military, September 3rd, 2025. Under the scorching sun of the Southern Caribbean, the United States launched a bloody military strike against one of the world's most feared drug cartels. The target, a 7,200-ton, 110-meter cargo ship, operated by the Tren de Aragua and traveling through international waters after leaving Venezuela. On board was a huge fortune in blood money, 300 tons of methamphetamine precursors, enough to make 190 tons of crystal meth worth more than $569 million, and 13,000 crates of cash destined to fund terrorism across the Americas. Worse still, 42 civilians were being held as slaves, forced to work under armed guard. For years, Tren de Aragua has been a nightmare, linked to more than 2,000 murders and 3,500 human trafficking cases. But this morning, the nightmare was attacked by the U.S. military. How can U.S. Special Forces attack while ensuring the safety of civilians? How to approach the target? I will show you the truth right now. September 3rd, 2025, 10:45 a.m. The calm waters of the Southern Caribbean concealed a storm of steel and violence about to unfold. On the horizon, a vessel measuring 110 meters in length and displacing over 7,200 tons cut across the international waters. Outwardly disguised as a civilian cargo ship, it carried a darker truth. Inside its hull, the infamous Tren de Aragua cartel had hidden 300 tons of methamphetamine precursors and held over 40 civilians, forced into labor as prisoners. For years, Tren de Aragua has been more than a criminal syndicate. It has operated like a shadow army. Intelligence reports linked the group to over 2,000 murders, 3,500 cases of human trafficking, and an empire of drug distribution stretching from Venezuela to the streets of Miami, Houston, and New York. They were not just smugglers. They were a designated foreign terrorist organization working under the protection of Nicolas Maduro's regime. Their reach was measured not in miles, but in lives destroyed. The value of the cargo on board was staggering. If processed, those 300 tons of chemical precursors could produce 190 tons of crystal meth, worth nearly $569 million on the U.S. market. Alongside the drugs were 13,000 barrels of cash, a fortune used to finance weapons, assassinations, and terror across the Western Hemisphere. As the ship pushed further north, it represented more than a cartel's lifeline. It was a floating arsenal of chaos, a ticking time bomb of narcotics, money, and human suffering. And on this day, America had chosen to make its move. This was not just another smuggling ship. It was a floating time bomb, filled with poison meant for our children, guarded by killers, and powered by blood money. Leaving it unchecked would have been leaving death to drift toward our shores. U.S. Secretary of Defense. Cartels like Tren de Aragua thrive on fear. Do you believe operations like this can finally stop them? Leave your answer in the comments. By 11:05 a.m. on September 3rd, 2025, the United States had already positioned its pieces on the chessboard. While the drug vessel moved steadily through the Southern Caribbean, American forces prepared an operation as precise as it was ruthless. The mission was simple in theory, but terrifying in execution. Cripple the cartel's floating fortress without risking the lives of innocent hostages. The opening move came from the skies. From a covert base on Curaçao, the Pentagon launched 50 reconnaissance kamikaze UAVs, each no larger than a motorcycle yet packed with a 40-pound warhead and advanced targeting software. Flying just 150 feet above sea level, they skimmed beneath radar coverage, invisible until it was too late. Collectively, they carried enough explosive power to rival the impact of 2 Tomahawk cruise missiles, yet their precision was far deadlier. Meanwhile, the sea carried its own ghost. A fishing trawler, disguised, unmarked, and outwardly harmless, crept within 8 nautical miles of the target. Hidden inside its cargo hold were 200 U.S. Navy SEALs, the elite of the elite. Their gear included the Mk-29 rebreather diving systems, allowing each man to remain underwater for 6 continuous hours without producing a single bubble. They were to be the silent blade beneath the storm, waiting for chaos above before striking from below. The numbers alone were staggering. 250 American operators and UAVs against a cartel crew of barely 150 armed guards, many poorly trained but desperate. The tactical edge was overwhelming. Every angle had been calculated. Decoy strikes from above, silent infiltration from beneath, and simultaneous disruption of communications once inside. For the men aboard the cartel's ship, it was just another day at sea. They had no idea that the world's most advanced military had already surrounded them, watching, waiting. In reality, the countdown to annihilation had already begun. These numbers are truly staggering, right? Share this video so more people can see how fierce the fight against drug cartels really is, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. At exactly 11:22 a.m. on September 3rd, 2025, the order was given. From beyond the horizon, the swarm of 50 kamikaze UAVs descended on the cartel vessel like a storm of steel hornets. Each drone screamed in at over 300 miles per hour, hugging the waves until the final moment before climbing sharply and diving into its target. The first impact struck the ship's stern. A UAV carrying 18 pounds of C4 detonated against a machine gun nest, instantly killing 3 armed guards and ripping apart the mounted weapon. Within 30 seconds, more than a dozen explosions thundered across the vessel. The ship shook violently as bulkheads ruptured, fuel drums ignited, and smoke towers rose 200 feet into the Caribbean sky. Cartel fighters scrambled in panic. Some fired blindly into the air, unloading entire 30-round magazines at shadows. Others rushed toward the hostages, attempting to use them as human shields. But the American drones had been programmed with surgical precision. They bypassed the cargo holds containing civilians and instead zeroed in on weapons caches and heavily armed fighters. By the 2-minute mark, 37 separate explosions had shredded the vessel's defenses. A drone punched into the forward deck, detonating inside a room stacked with ammunition crates. The blast incinerated over 4,000 rounds of 7.62mm ammunition, triggering a chain of secondary explosions that tore through 4 adjoining compartments. In less than 5 minutes, the cartel's command structure disintegrated. 9 gunmen were confirmed killed instantly, while another 40 were left wounded or incapacitated. Terrified survivors leapt overboard, plunging into the sea, where U.S. reconnaissance teams tracked them with infrared scanners. Yet the drones were only the first wave. As the final UAV slammed into the bridge, shattering communications equipment worth nearly $3 million, the cartel ship was effectively blind and deaf. Smoke poured from ruptured hull sections, and fires raged uncontrolled across the upper decks. Below the chaos, 200 Navy SEALs waited silently in the deep, spread in a perimeter formation within 500 yards of the ship. The explosions above were their signal. As the last drone detonated, shaking the vessel from bow to stern, the divers kicked upward through the water, moving like shadows toward the hull. The battlefield was now split between air and sea, above a burning fortress collapsing into confusion, below a ring of steel-clad warriors closing in. The trap was no longer theory. The Americans were inside the kill box, and the cartel had no way out. What do you think will happen next as U.S. Navy SEALs rise from the depths to storm the ship? Let's find out in the next part. As the last drone strike rocked the cartel vessel at 11:28 a.m., the sea itself erupted with movement. From all sides, 200 Navy SEALs surged upward, breaking the surface like ghosts rising from the abyss. Armed with suppressed MP-7 submachine guns and combat knives, they clamped magnetic grapples onto the hull and began their ascent. Within 90 seconds, the first operators breached the deck. The ship's defenders, those who had survived the drone barrage, rushed to resist. But the SEALs came in waves, each squad of 12 men storming different access points. In the portside corridor, a team cleared 4 rooms in under 40 seconds, eliminating 6 cartel fighters with precision headshots. On the starboard flank, breachers used thermite charges to cut through a locked bulkhead, then tossed in stun grenades. The explosion of light and sound left 8 armed guards writhing on the ground, disoriented and helpless. The battle raged deck by deck, Cartel gunmen, some half-blinded by smoke, unleashed panicked fire. In one firefight near the engine compartment, a SEAL squad exchanged over 200 rounds with entrenched defenders. 3 SEALs were struck, shoulder, thigh, and forearm, but continued fighting, pushing forward until the last gunman fell. The most critical mission was the hostage rescue. At 11:35 a.m., Team Bravo breached the cargo hold where 42 civilians, men and women forced into labor, were shackled. Guards tried to use them as human shields, but the SEALs' laser-sighted rifles cut them down in under 10 seconds. Every hostage was freed, and medical units immediately began stabilizing the weakest among them. By now, the Americans controlled nearly 70% of the ship. The bridge was shattered, the engine room secured, and cartel fighters were fleeing below deck. One SEAL assault group swept the surveillance control center, disabling every camera feed in just 3 minutes, blinding the remaining defenders completely. The casualty balance was devastating. Within just 12 minutes of boarding, the SEALs had killed 15 cartel gunmen, captured dozens more, and taken command of all key compartments. Only 5 SEALs sustained injuries, none life-threatening. Against them, the cartel had lost nearly half its fighting force and all its command capability. Smoke curled skyward, gunfire crackled sporadically, but the outcome was already sealed. The cartel's floating fortress was no longer theirs. It was now a battlefield owned by America's finest warriors. By 11:48 a.m. on September 3, 2025, the ship was silent except for the crackle of flames and the boots of American soldiers pounding across its decks. In less than half an hour, the fortress of Tren de Aragua had been reduced to a shattered carcass of steel. The battlefield now belonged entirely to the United States. The results were staggering. In the span of 26 minutes, U.S. forces had neutralized the heart of one of South America's most violent cartels. 9 cartel members lay dead, including 2 mid-level commanders, while over 120 fighters were captured alive, many too badly wounded to resist. 3 of the detainees were identified as regional coordinators, men directly responsible for smuggling routes into Miami and Houston. Their arrest represented the collapse of entire branches of the cartel's operations. The seizure of contraband was even more shocking. Deep inside the ship's cargo holds, SEALs uncovered 300 tons of methamphetamine precursors, stored in steel containers disguised as fertilizer drums. Chemical experts on scene confirmed that this stockpile could be refined into 190 tons of crystal meth, enough to flood the U.S. with more than 1.5 billion street doses. On the open market, the value soared past $569 million, a fortune in narcotics ripped straight from the cartel's grasp. Yet the drugs were only part of the discovery. In a hidden compartment beneath the forward deck, SEAL teams pried open crates to reveal 13,000 blue-painted cash barrels. Inside, neatly bundled U.S. dollars, Colombian pesos,